So you might be wondering, what is a really good and powerful tier 10 tank destroyer that can dominate games and also have a little bit of armor and be able to be quite usable by a lot of players, as well as have a entire tech tree line that leads up to it that's really fun to play? Well, that is of course where the Object 268, the tier 10 Soviet tank destroyer, comes into play and is what really competitive, and in fact is often actually one of the more underrated vehicles that you can play on World of Tanks console. So I guess today's video we're going to have a look at how this thing can be so good, as well as be able to have some excellent games as well. We've got two really good replays to showcase all aspects about the tank, as well as one of the games where we have a really good one. So hopefully that will be interesting for you guys to see the kind of upper echelon of what the Object 268 can do. As you can see, we 3-marked this thing a while back. It was one of the first tier 10s that I actually picked up in World of Tanks, probably about 6 years ago, maybe even longer, 7 years ago on console. So yeah, this tank is really fun to play. And so what is this tank all about? Well, it is one of the more I guess heavily armored versions of tank destroyers, albeit it doesn't get the best armor. You can be penned by a lot of tanks provided that they hit where you're kind of weakest at, because every single time, wherever you're actually going to be wiggling or moving, there are weak points that enemies can hit, and provided that they're not, you know, new to the game or less experienced, or maybe their accuracy actually hits where they want, you will be able to get penned almost every single time. But the thing about this thing is it does have quite troll armor, and you can often bait people into shooting the wrong area, at which point they end up bouncing because of these weird angles that you see on this tank, which is really cool. And you can see it's very well angled in terms of its armor layout. There's lots of different weird bouncy angles that can just auto ricochet shells, and so the tank's armor actually works a little bit better than what you might presume, given the thicknesses of some of the plates that you have, looking at about 135 on the upper plate, which is very well angled, at least when you're kind of in this sort of area. And as soon as you start doing this, the right hand plate becomes impenetrable from basically every single round in the game, but the nearest plate will be penned by almost every tank that you meet, including tier 8s. Similar sort of story on the turret of the tank, if you were to call it a turret, you know, the main superstructure, I guess. And you can see this nearest plate is going to be able to be penned. The rear and the mantlet, or other side, I guess, is going to be very difficult to pen. So this is kind of how this tank plays. You've got to wiggle and cause your opponents to hit the wrong side of the tank that they should be aiming at. And often you can actually fake to actually switch sides and then quickly switch back, and then they aim at the wrong place and end up don't penning. But obviously you can't rely on armor in this game, and so you should really be thinking about what you can do back to the opponents that are going to be attempting to hit you, or how to remain undetected from a lot of the opponents that are going to try and hit you. Now, in terms of this tank's gun, well, it has 850 alpha damage, one of the highest alpha damages in the game, or at least on par with the other tier 10 tank destroyers, things like the E4. You also have a variety of other tanks that have similar sort of alphas. You're looking at the Gorilla 15, etc. Albeit they have slightly less alpha at 750, but at the same time, you're kind of in that mid to higher range of the tank destroyer alpha that you can get in the game. And of course, the reload of this tank isn't even bad. 11.6 seconds, 7 seconds to be able to do 850 damage means that your damage per minute in this tier 10 tank destroyer nearly 4,400, which puts you up there with some of the medium tanks, albeit they have a lot less alpha, and you have almost double, well, over double the alpha of a lot of those medium tanks that you'll be facing. So yeah, you don't have to poke as much, and when the tank is as reliable as this one with the brilliant accuracy, you can see 0.27 here in the center of the screen. So yeah, very good accuracy. Aim time 2.49 seconds, so it doesn't even feel that bad, and the dispersion isn't absolutely horrendous, so when you move the tank it blooms out massively. It doesn't do that as much with this tank, so that's kind of good as well. And then you have 5 degrees gun depression, so you can use ridge lines a little bit, albeit it is a bit limiting with this tank. So yeah, there is that. But at the same time, what you've got to do is try and find those spots on the map that you can use, and hopefully we'll showcase a couple of spots on a couple of the maps that we have in the replays coming up, that maybe if you're wondering about using this tank, or maybe you've picked it up and you're not getting to grips with it, how you can kind of deal with it and stuff like that as well as some of the other tanks that are in this line. You have the 704, the ISU 152, the SU 152 and the SU 100. Basically from below that I'm not going to bother covering, but at the same time this tank is also very fast. 48 kilometers an hour top speed puts it up there with some of the fastest tank destroyers in the game, bar the Turan for example, which I mean to all intents and purposes is not really a comparable tank because that is just absolutely broken, and of course you have to pay for it. So this one is completely free provided you grind up the line and have the silver to buy it, so that's always great as well. And then you have in terms of like kitting out the tank and its equipment, I've gone with advanced optics to get more view range so we can spot people whilst remaining undetected before we end up firing. I've then got advanced loader, so when we do fire we can reload quicker. Very good to have in this tank. And then I've also got advanced reload. Now this is the kind of thing that you don't have to take, and in fact there is a potential that you may want to take something like advanced concealment so that you can remain undetected for a longer period of time and use the spotting mechanics of the game to get additional combined kind of damage within the game. The reason why I load advanced reload is simply for the HE pens. So because you got 90mm of penetration, a lot of medium tanks that you come up against, especially the French ones, and of course all of the light tanks in the game, with 90mm of penetration you can pen most things, and even the rear of some of the heavy tanks in the game you can pen with 90 pen. So it's nice to get that additional kind of 250 damage when you do find those opportunities. So having the ability to swap to HE is always kind of nice, as well as the fact that sometimes if you can't actually pen someone, it might be nice to fire a bit of HE to get some damage, or you know, if you're in those kind of clutch situations where you just need to take someone out, it's nice to have the option to just instantly switch to the round that is best for you, as well as being able to swap between the standard rounds and the premium rounds is also nice, because heat ammunition, as I say in all my videos, is good. It's amazing for armor, but at the same time if you hit tracks with it, you don't actually go through the track, it gets absorbed by the tracks in the game. So say if you were shooting the inner side of the Object 268 here, you were going through the tracks to try and hit the hull of the tank, you wouldn't actually pen with heat because of the fact that you're going to get your heat round absorbed by the tracks. Now that isn't always the case, sometimes you can go through there, but it is a hell of a lot more unreliable, and you want to guarantee damage when you're playing in a tank like this, because if you miss or don't deal damage, people know about it and they'll try and push you, get the damage back or that they may have lost earlier in the fight that you might have had. And so obviously that is kind of the key aspects of the 268. For those of you wondering, yes, that cupola on the top of the tank does actually count as armor and can be penned. Don't hit the left and right areas of that cupola because you just won't pen. It's that green portion that we can highlight here, hopefully. There you go, that's the area that you actually want to hit of the tank, the center column, I guess, of this cupola. Other than that, that is kind of how the 268 plays. Very fast tank destroyer, very well kind of bruiser tank destroyer, where you can kind of go in and support teammates. I would recommend having teammates because sometimes they can get around the side of you, and although the 268 is a turreted tank destroyer, it's actually quite good, or a non-turreted tank destroyer I should say, it is actually quite good at turning. And although it might not seem that way, when you do find yourself up against light tanks, you will be able to actually traverse quite well, and you've got to kind of pull up against a rock or something and then just turn towards them, and you should be able to get a shot off. And with the good accuracy and dispersion, you can often hit them, which is always nice as well. So the 268, very powerful tank. It was one of my favorites when I did actually 3-mark it, and maybe in some time later on down the line, if I have time, we might go for the 4th mark or something like that, but I won't guarantee anything. It's just the time it takes to actually mark tanks. You know, playing 100 games or something like that to 3-mark a tank can be a bit of a pain, especially when I've got to do videos where we cover like literally all of the tanks in the game and stuff like that. So yeah, hence why you haven't really seen any 3-marks since I kind of really started doing content, because you know, most of the time I am playing variety of different tanks, and often, you know, 50 games is split between something like 20 tanks. So either way, that is the 268 in terms of its stats, how we load it up. Obviously running full premium consumables, we also use ourselves the camouflage. I think we may even have permanent camouflage on this tank, just so that we can, you know, play it whenever we want to without having to worry about putting camo on, because it can be a pain. But yeah, camo on it. Very, very nice. I would love to see a skin for the 268. Definitely would purchase that one. But yeah, as of yet, no skin, unfortunately. But either way, that is kind of how we play the tank. Commander wise, you can see here, I'm not going to go into every single perk, as we've done that before on basically a ton of vehicles, and it is generically the same sort of one. We've gone for a spotting build and of course an accuracy build that also has the track mechanic, so you can repair your tracks faster. That's kind of how we play this tank. But other than that, let's jump into the gameplay and see exactly how it plays. Now then, the first gameplay that we do have is on El Haluf. The 268 is quite good on this map. You've got lots of open areas that you can kind of deal with a lot of tanks with, which makes this tank very, very good at being able to do that. The great thing about the 268 is that you can kind of play quite passively in the early game to pick up, you know, 1, 2, maybe even 3 shots, and obviously if you get very lucky you can pick up, you know, 4, 5, 6 shots if you're very lucky and you get the right sort of map. But as you can see here, what I'm doing is coming to this location. It is quite pre-fireable. People do end up actually just automatically firing over here, so you've got to be very careful, especially if you're doing what I'm about to do, which is to try and support the YOLO wagon E50 from being basically getting out of the game, so we can support our teammate down there in the heavy tank. It's always horrible when you see just YOLO wagons on the enemy team that ruin one of your teammates' games, and you can see that's exactly what the Batchat's done here. But luckily we've got 2 YOLO wagons as well, and the Batchat's going to find himself in a hairy situation, which is brilliant, because, you know, it's always horrible when they do decide to just YOLO and waste themselves in the game. But here you go, this is the second shot that we've picked up just from literally sitting over here. You've got to be careful of other tank destroyers, especially FV4005s and FV215B183s in the game like this. But you can see here we go for the blind fire on that guy, finish him off, and we're up to nearly 1900 damage already. So this is kind of how great this tank is, and already we're reloaded to go again. And this is what I loved about the 268, is the reload is insanely good, and you feel like you're constantly in the fight, even though, you know, you're not a medium tank and can reload in 6 seconds. The 11 seconds, very, very nice indeed. So, from this point, you kind of have to play quite passively. We can't really go in. It's a bit difficult to use ridgelines, and therefore we don't really want to be going to the area with the hill in B3. Now you can push up to like A3, but often when you're trying to poke a corner with a non-turreted tank destroyer, unless you've got super good armor like a T110E3, it can often end up with kind of the bad vibes. You can end up getting removed pretty quickly, and of course then end up missing shot as they pull back around the corner after they fired at you, since they're pre-aiming. So you've got to be mindful of that when you are playing tanks like this. So just keep that into account when you're trying to play your tanks. But so far, the kind of game is going pretty evenly. There's a lot of kind of even damage in this game. You can see we pick up the Charlemagne there, which is nice. We've got a Griller on the enemy team, and we've also got a heavy tank, as well as this 416, who's making a push into the center. We do have this tank destroyer on the enemy team, the FV215B183, that's not been spotted yet until now, or at least he hasn't been able to be hit by us, and you see he's over there still. But obviously the key thing about the 268 is if you think someone's in a location, you have the amount of rounds in the tank to go for blind fires occasionally, so you are going to want to do that to get some, you know, occasional shots of damage, like we saw with the Earthshaker earlier in the game where we took him out. And that's the sort of thing you can do with a tank like this. It's not like an FV4005 where if you fire, you've got to wait 20 seconds to reload. It's a lot quicker, and you're not really taken out of the action all too much. Safe to say, if there are tanks approaching you, don't go blind firing random places, because you're going to need that shell to guarantee the pen on whoever might be pushing you. But yeah, you can see here, this is where the hill area kind of dries up on this map, and where it is a bit of a pain, because ultimately I can't do anything at this point in the battle. And there is something to be said for kind of pushing up, but oh, for God's sake, there's an Object 416 who's decided he's going to push up, and unfortunately for him, he is not going to be able to get away with it. Here you go. Finish him off out of the game. Bye-bye. No more Mr. 416. Now, we did get hit by the FV in this game by the looks of it. A HE round to the side. But obviously, this tank has a little bit of armor, so he didn't actually pen, which is brilliant. But now we know that he is over in the kind of area over there. It was a bit risky to turn like backhand on to the FV. Maybe we could have reversed down the slope, but you know, it could have caused more problems with the 416. So it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. I wasn't expecting him to push all the way up without getting spotted. Either way, game is neck and neck. It's 6v6. And we picked up 3.4k damage, which is okay, but it's not insane. But what is brilliant is, here you go, tracking the FV out in the open. Unfortunately, no one hit him, but either way, would have been a nice shot if anyone did hit him as well, because we got the actual damage as well as maybe some assistance too. Now then, with the enemy team kind of pushing up to where this 277 is, we can go for a bit of damage, hopefully, on them. And there you go, high rolling the 277 for about 20 damage. Picking up the 4th enemy of this game, and it's now a 4 versus 5, which is brilliant because yeah, we got some room to actually try and carry in this game. We've got 2 other tank destroyers alongside a medium tank that is left in this game, so should be a pretty interesting one to see if we can win it. Obviously no guarantees, and with us here we should spot anyone that tries to push down the hill, and we're kind of just pre-aiming that, ready for anyone that does make that mistake potentially. Equally, people might kind of push over to the other side. You can see the gun depression here of the tank kind of letting us down there. Maybe I should have pushed up to this location here before, but then it gives us a lack of shots on people pushing down the hill. So it swings and roundabouts. You've got to choose a side to actually aim, and unfortunately for us, we miss out on the damage on the 277 there. But obviously the other 2 tank destroyers, one of them has pushed over to the enemy space alongside one of them that is over here. Now, with the tank destroyer that's over here, hopefully he's going to be able to help us out. We're playing like with fire here against the Ruthless. The E100 ends up firing, and we're checking what gun he's got. He has got the small gun, so he would be able to out-reload us. But unfortunately for him, he's taken out by the Jagdtiger. Lovely work from the Jagdtiger to kind of position himself up on the hill to get some crossfire shots. And that's amazing, as it allows us to hopefully carry this game through to a victory. But here you go, another tank has spawned, or at least spawned into our base, and you can see he's pushed up to B6. Now B6 is kind of defendable from where the Jagdtiger is, because you can poke down the hill, but it is available and up for grabs for the people on the other side of the hill, provided they can kind of get into a location to hit him. Appears like the medium tank on the enemy team, or on our team, is kind of pushing up to try and take out the 277 on the enemy team. And with 5,000 damage done, we kind of don't want to push in against the Ruthless, because we can get taken out very quickly. He could even high roll us for us being removed from the game, because we know all about those high alpha tank destroyers. They're always so fun as we're playing one. But you know what I mean. It just is super annoying to have so many high alpha tanks, especially when you're playing in those mediums and kind of heavy tanks that don't have, you know, 700 plus alpha. It is a bit of a pain. But we are going to now try and help out our medium tank here. We're going to commit to a flank. We need to do something, and we remove our friend in the Object 277. However, the Astron Rex does get taken out on our team, leaving it in a 3 versus 2. So hopefully we can secure a victory against them. But there is a Grilla 15 in this game, and of course with the Grilla 15 lurking about, hopefully we can pick him up with some HE ammo. But you can see here we get spotted by the Ruthless, who's pushed down, and hopefully we don't get hit by a Grilla 15. Please, please, please. He misses. Brilliant. Awesome. Love to see it, and that allows us to escape now with all of the hit points from earlier intact, which is brilliant, because now we can use those in the later game to kind of finish people off. We just need to be sure that we can deal with this kind of Grilla with the HE, and then also deal with the Ruthless with just a standard heat round or a standard round in this tank, because we can remove him with either, and the armor of the Ruthless is not that insane, so we should pen with 303, which is the standard. But we don't want to risk anything in this game. I've just got to make sure that when I am aiming, I do aim properly with the heat round. So yeah, not bad at all. But we're kind of going into this location. I'm hoping the gorilla gets spotted out in the open or something. But obviously you've got to kind of rely on the enemy team doing silly things, but sometimes they don't actually do that. So you are going to have to play a little bit more carefully. And the reason why I wanted to showcase this gameplay was kind of about the facts of how you can kind of play tank destroyers in the game. You don't have to be kind of brawling the entire time, but equally you don't want to be one of those tank destroyers that sits around in one spot for the entire game. Sometimes you have to make decisions like going down to kill the Object 277, otherwise it becomes infinitely more difficult when you've got loads of different tanks coming from all sorts of different angles, and sometimes you need to risk it to be able to win games, and you aren't going to learn anything or anything like that if you just sat in one spot for the entire game. So this is the point at which this position kind of becomes a bit tedious, to say the least. So what I'm doing is I'm highlighting to the Jagdtiger, like, we need to start removing these tanks, otherwise one of us is going to get spotted, taken out, blah blah blah. And so the risky part here is if I get spotted by the Ruthless, who's pushed up to my left. He hasn't done that, which is good, and that allows us to kind of get around this rock, but we still have to be very careful. We don't know where the gorilla is in this game, and we can two-shot the gorilla, and so we could either load a HE round to get extra damage and hope that our teammate takes him out, or we can load the standard rounds and hope that we can just get 2 shots off before he takes us out. So it's kind of a battle of damage per minute in this game. To try and win it, or at least come away with some more damage. But with 5,500 damage in the 268, this would be a game where you would go up in your tank. The Ruthless gets spotted in the middle of the map on the other side, and unfortunately we are not able to hit him from there. But what we really need to do in this game is finish off this gorilla. He was over here when he was last spotted, so I'm a little bit careful, just looking around, panning around, using the third person camera angle and seeing if we could find him. Not necessarily find him, but, you know, just be aware of where he could be from, and just making sure that if he does turn up, we can turn pretty quickly, as we don't want to waste any time against him, because that could be the difference between life and being removed. But either way, we've kind of pushed into this location. This opens up the map a little bit more. The Jagdtiger is, of course, on the other side, kind of defending the base, and there you go. Someone does get spotted. It's the Ruthless by the seams of it. Yes, it is. And he's over there up against the tank destroyer, the Jagdtiger. So the Jagdtiger is on low hit points, so he can be removed by the Ruthless pretty quickly. And of course there's a gorilla that could be sneaking up from the other side, so we need to really provide some support to this guy. But the gorilla does appear to be in the open, or at least partially in the open, that maybe we can hit him with. And here you go, the gorilla's out in the open. We load a HE, we hit, and we don't hit, but we still damage the tracks of him. So yeah, a little bit unfortunate there, but either way, he probably now knows where we are, which is not a good situation to be in, because yeah, he could come and sneak up from behind us or come from any sort of direction. Maybe he goes for a blind fire, etc. So we don't have to move just yet. We can move in a bit, but the whole point is that we need to kind of keep our aim on where this Ruthless may come from. We've loaded a standard round again, just so that we can pen the Ruthless. We can't pen him with HE. So we've kind of stayed here long enough. The Ruthless doesn't look like he's going to poke. We have the view range to outspot him most of the time, as long as we're still. So yeah, with that being said, we kind of push back over to this location, give it a bit of a slimmer angle, and make it a lot harder for someone behind us to kind of rock up and come from behind. But obviously that can still happen. The gorilla can two-shot us, as well as us two-shotting the gorilla. He's on 1400 hit points. Obviously with 2 lots of 850, we can deal 1700 total damage. He doesn't aim, which is the biggest mistake he makes in this game, because yeah, now he is in a world of pain. The main thing with the 268 is to try and get this guy out of the game. He doesn't poke all the way over the ridge. The best thing for the gorilla here was if he was to just go all the way over the ridge. Like, genuinely just go towards the Ruthless. Unfortunately, he doesn't do that. And the great thing about the 268 is, you see, we pen for 1000, and then we finish him off with a great DPM to remove him very, very quickly. Obviously, taking 1 hit, allowing us to be an absolute one-shot for the Ruthless in this game. And of course, trying to push a Ruthless at this stage in the game is quite difficult. So we're going to have to try and outspot him. And with only 49 seconds on the clock, it is a bit tight to try and win this game. So it may even come down to whose team has removed the most damage in the game. So it's one of those, a bit of a clenchy time, if you know what I mean, and just hope that you might win, provided that you at least try at the end of the game to try and win the game. But with us being on 500 hit points, the Ruthless being on 400, it is kind of a toss-up between which side wins. Obviously, dependent on what side got more heavy tanks or what side got more health on their heavy tanks. Maybe one team get a load of Mauses, and you know, so I could be on 400, the Ruthless could be on 400, but because they got a lot more Mauses in the game, with more hit points, we could have still won, because it's about how much damage you dealt to the enemy team, regardless of, you know, what tank composition is like. So they could have had 50,000 total hit points to begin with, and we had 40,000, and if we end up on 400 each, we've done more damage, therefore we win, which is why we won this game and came away with 7,000 damage, 6 enemies taken out, 1,493 base XP, and would have probably gone up on our marks of excellence if we were actually grinding them at this time. But unfortunately for me, I've been firing a lot of HE in this tanks as part of a meme kind of experiment, just trying out the HE rounds, just loading only HE, stuff like that, just silly things after we 3-marked it, which is probably why we're at 1 mark now, albeit that it is significantly impacted by not playing it in a long time. This was probably the first game in about 2 years or something like that, so a long time since we played the 268, but a really interesting one, and definitely one that I would recommend. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, however, when you play the 268. Things can go wrong, and often in a tank that has a higher skill cap like this one, it can be quite difficult for newer players to get directly stuck in and have like outrageous games. However, it is quite easy to play in terms of the alpha damage, makes it easier to play. So often you can do good, but it's hard to have those exceptional games. And even from someone that's played this tank and played it quite well in the past, or at least, you know, played enough of it to get 3 marks, and kind of learning about how the tank plays, obviously spending a lot of time in the early years actually just trying to play the tank and get better at the game, it is very good at being able to do that. But one of the things it is annoying for is sometimes the accuracy doesn't always work, and sometimes you can bounce off of tanks that you probably shouldn't, which can get frustrating, especially if it happens game after game. And of course it's both down to the accuracy of the tank being quite good, and so you expect to hit shots, as well as the penetration being really nice as well, and you still end up bouncing. Yeah, 2 shots bounce off of the FV. Very lucky shots to hit in the first place, but nonetheless annoying that we didn't actually pen either of them, which we probably should have done. And if we were loading heat, we probably would have penned both of those shots, and the FV would be no more. But either way, we have the 257 here who's pushed up, and this spot is a good one, at least to begin with, to start trying to take out some of these tanks. You can see here an FV who's pushing up, and the 257, and of course, given that there's not really anyone over there spotting, there could potentially be more vehicles. Now we're going to move slightly to try and get a shot on this 257, which hopefully we can pen here, but we don't really know. And of course, by going here, we open up some more angles as to other tanks that we can see, and we bounce off of a prop. So yeah, getting a little bit triggered that we bounced 3 rounds, but the whole thing about this tank is that even with a lot of bounces, you can end up like pulling ridiculous amounts of damage in the game anyway. So it's really just down to you know, personal preference as to whether you like these high alpha tank destroyers. We end up not even hitting the Action X, so yeah, not going well. 4 shots fired, 0 damage. But don't worry, because damage does come when you play an 850 alpha TD that reloads in 11 seconds, and it really doesn't take long. All you need is a solid minute of firing, and you can be on some crazy amounts of damage. Not the best shot aimed at that guy, but at this point we are hoping to get one on the prop. Now he then pulls back behind, allowing us to try and get rid of the 257, who finally, after 6 shells, we do actually pen someone, and it goes straight through the roof of the 257, allowing us to secure a bit of damage. And here you go, Mr. Prop in his prop, and there you go, another damage, 905 with the 55 damage high roll on that shell, and a brilliant kind of start to the damage journey. But Oh, here we go. Our friend in the AVRE who doesn't manage to pen. Ah, that's a real shame that we see another cave dweller in his Centurion AVRE pushing in, thinking that he's all broken and stuff. And yeah, we're going to show him what an actual tank destroyer can do to him. And here you go. He's out in the open. No, I said let's show him what an actual tank destroyer can do. Oh look, he's taken out 2 of my crew members from not penning me with 500 damage that he just dealt without even aiming properly. And if he was aiming properly, he could have penned me. But we have 390 pen, and he's got a Centurion turret, which is very good against, you know, typical medium tanks. But unfortunately for him, we're not a typical medium tank, and so we have ridiculous pen. And unfortunately for him, he doesn't aim again and ended up not actually penning us. He could have dealt at least 1 full penetration damage to us in that encounter, but unfortunately for him, he didn't. And purely because he didn't aim. But then again, he's playing a Centurion AVRE, which, you know, those sorts of players, they don't typically like to aim. They prefer to auto-aim going around corners and stuff like that. But he can say bye-bye because, you know, AVREs and stuff. But still, we're going to push our way up, try and get some damage on these heavies who are pushed up. You see there is an E100. He's about to give us a free shot. Oh, wait, no, he's not. But we're going to have to work for this. We've done 3.7k, which is okay, but it's nothing outrageous. And there you go, a free shot into the top of the E100. Up to 4,500 so far. And Vladimir Biceps, a very interesting name. We can now kind of go towards him, and he, of course, is going to give us the back of his turret or side of his turret, which with 390 heat pen is just butter. And exactly like a knife through butter, we're able to just go straight through the side of his turret. He's going to give us an extra bit here. And there you go, back to the garage, Mr. E100. And out of a game where we missed, you know, 5 shots in a row at the beginning, yeah, 5.5k, I'm not going to complain about it. And it's all mainly down to the AVRE gifting us some damage from not aiming. So always aim in your tanks, because even in the ones where you deal damage, even if you don't pen, you can get a hell of a lot more damage and you may not have actually got taken out. So yeah, that even comes from the person who didn't aim with his tank destroyer. So yeah, even with us missing a shell on the AVRE and not fully aiming properly and trying to shoot the side of an angled tank with spaced armor with heat rounds, yeah, we still come away with a victory and of course survive, much like the AVRE did not. So with that all being said, hopefully this video was at least useful, informative, interesting, entertaining, whatever it might be for you. If you've watched it to this point, I thank you all as much as possible. So with that all coming to a close, I guess if you enjoyed, like the video, and of course if you want to see some more, there's some gameplay and tank reviews, and we'll pop all of the recent ones into the gameplay and tank reviews playlist that we've done recently. And then on the left there should just be the most recent video that we've done on this game, including the new Soviet double barrel tanks that are coming in next week, or at least tomorrow when you watch this video. So other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.